Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Af Malhotra on Straight Talk with Af. Once again, I bring you a magnificent show with two superb guests. One of these guests is a legend, no doubt, and someone I've had on the show twice before, so this is his third time, and is, I would say, for many people, is the father of gaming. He created a business called Atari many years ago, and I bought an Atari device when I was much younger, and that's how I learned to game. And that's why I find gaming to be one of the most powerful ways of learning. We'll talk more about this in a moment. Welcome, Nolan Bushnell. Nolan, thank you for coming on the show.
Great to be here. Always having fun. You know, uh, I like your, I like the way you talk about things. So it's good to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Ditto. So, totally inspired. My other guest, of course, is Dr. Leah Haynes. Now, uh, Leah is the CEO of what we'll talk about in a moment, which is the ExoDexa program and or manifesto. And more importantly, she, along with Nolan, have authored this beauty, which is, as you can see, shaping the future of education. I would say it's transforming education. It's a manual for transforming education. Super exciting, powerful, compelling, inspiring, and controversial. And controversial because many of you who are watching this who are head teachers and own schools or run schools may not be happy with this manifesto because it will force you to change. But it'll all make a lot of sense very, very soon, and it's safe and it's good for all of us in the long run. So, welcome both, Leah. Thank you for coming on the show, and I'm very excited to have you and Nolan talk about your book, most importantly, and then of course Exodexa. So, we're going to go right into it, if that's okay. And of course, I have a series of questions because I am a parent. I'm in the technology space and built my own companies and sold them, and some failed and some succeeded. I'm an ex-governor of an all-through school, so it was a joyful and painful experience for all of the reasons you all know and you have in the book. And I've been desperately trying to find an alternative for my children. They're young enough right now, and then when they grow up, the high school system that exists today is just not fit for purpose. We all know it. Many of us have been harping on about this and shouting from the rooftops for decades, Nolan, you included. And I know you've been trying to do something in this space over the last few years, and I'm so glad that you've done this, starting with the book. So, my first question, really, for those who haven't read your book, and by the way, please go and buy the book. It is available all over the world on Amazon. It's 256 pages of wisdom and pragmatism and 9 chapters. And I haven't finished all of the book, but the way I learn, I go back and forth. And I'll talk to you about what I've learned as well, which is just absolutely brilliant. So, firstly, Nolan, for you, the last show we had, you were working on something similar. It was called something different, and I know you've sort of morphed into this, evolved into the Exodexa world. Tell us about why education matters to you so much. And I know you've got 8 lovely children, so you're a veteran in this game. But why education and why gaming and why now? That would be really helpful.
I think that I have this blessing curse that my brain latches onto something and then I have to push it to the extreme. It's just how my DNA works. And having kids and seeing how games can be revolutionary. And then I asked the question, if you were inventing the school for the first time with technology that we currently have, how would you do it?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes what we get bogged down in is we think we should evolve what we have instead of just throwing everything in the rubbish bin and starting afresh with a clean sheet of paper. And I think a clean sheet of paper is actually a good thing because and also impossible, I might add, because we're all informed by the way we were taught and what we've done. But the more you can sort of dehinge yourself and then be a honest steward of the future. What do I mean by that? I consider myself to be a secondary researcher. What does that mean? It means that I don't do the primary research, but I read the papers and I do deep dives, and I try to collect what I perceive to be the current wisdom on a subject. And in education, there's this flow state. There's an exercise component. There's a nutritional component. There is, an AR, VR component. There's an AI component now. And so how do you sort of mash that all together into a meaningful whole? And so I designed a school or a pedagogy that could, excuse me, I got a little cough here.
That's okay.
How could I inform that into a school of the future? Excuse me about that. Yes. Okay. So that's kind of the genesis, and then once I kind of got it out, if you do something, you want to infect the world with it, and that's where the book came out. And I have a lot of opinions, and Dr. Leah is the one that makes it rigorous. And actually, I mean, she's a lot smarter than I am, and she's got a PhD to prove it. So there we have it.
And how did you meet? How did you both meet, by the way? So I hadn't figured that one out. I know there was something about a bar, but I'm not sure that was the first time you met. So Leah, how did you meet with Nolan, and how did you decide that you both need to join forces to make this happen?
Well, for the last decade, I have been running a nonprofit called the Two-Bit Circus Foundation, and the chairman of the board of my nonprofit is Brent Bushnell, Nolan's oldest son.
Got it.
So Nolan and I, when I first became interested in talking to Nolan about education, it was at a conversation we had at the bar at Brent's venue in the Arts District in Los Angeles. And we were talking about focus and kids in classrooms, and Nolan made a comment about how, not all the kids who are diagnosed with attention deficit disorder actually have attention deficit disorder. They have boredom in class, and you can put them in front of their favorite video game and you'll see how long they can focus. And I believe it's true. I mean, there are some kids who definitely have an imbalance and need help, but a lot of kids just are not served by the way we've been teaching. And we have version 15 of the iPhone in as many years, but we're using the same version of the classroom that we've used for 100 years. And, maybe we move them to tables instead of rows of desks, but pretty much the system is the same. And when Nolan and I were talking after that conversation, he told me that he had written an outline for a book and asked if I'd be interested in co-authoring it with him. And like, what fool would say no to Nolan when they ask if they're going to co-author a book? So of course I said yes. And when I read what Nolan had written, my reaction was very much like what you just said, F, that the change is needed. And looking at it from a visionary point of view, because Nolan wasn't restrained by working inside the education system. I work inside the education system. And I feel like what we have is something that teachers will celebrate, because it's not the teachers that are the problem. It's the system that's the problem. And making change is really hard in any system. So, but helping them see what we have now in technology that we apply in video games and we apply in other areas when we're marketing to children, but we aren't applying it in schools. Kids go to school because they are supposed to, not because they are excited to get back to the project they're working on or the so that's where it all came from. And Nolan's writing was very insightful. So I felt inspired to work through that and add some academic rigor to the writing.
Got it. One of the reasons I feel so compelled about this piece of work that you've both done and are doing is, and I've been thinking a lot about why I've been drawn to your book, and I have been thinking about this quite a lot. And I think one of the reasons I feel very hopeful about what you've written, and I think it's possible that change will happen, is because of COVID. I think COVID was the trigger that if I had this conversation before COVID, and it's been happening for a while. There've been many books and many thought leaders. Ken Robinson used to talk about it. His famous TED talk was the thing that got some tremors going for a while. But of course, then people lost interest and we're back to the status quo, the normal, as they say. I think coming out of COVID, you see parents, educators, teachers, head teachers, even policymakers and regulators all over the world who are a little bit more open, a little bit more courageous, a little bit more fearless than they were pre-COVID, although it was an awful time because we realized, oh my God, we're in trouble here. Our kids can't go to the physical school and we have all the curriculum is on hard copy. We have nothing online, hardly really, unless those schools who were outliers who had, Google Classrooms or things like that. And now what you propose in this book has so much of what was learned during that time and much more. So, for example, and I just want to sort of paraphrase this. At the end of the book, page 238, just for those who haven't read it, I'm trying to sort of do the sales bit for you as well here. So people go buy the book. There are three very important aspects of, I think, what Nolan and both of you are trying to say. You say that the purpose of Exodex and this book, of course, and the whole program that you're looking to build is gamifying the curriculum, which is desperately needed. Individualizing learning. We all know about personalization. It's necessary, it's mandatory, essential. And finally, redesigning the physical school. Now, that bit really got me excited because I was constantly thinking, oh, no one's going to do this. And, they're stuck in their ways and the classrooms are the way they are. The entrances are the way they are. Boring, not interesting. Oh, my God, how are we going to change the system? So I want to ask you a question. We'll go down the path of, and either of you, and Nolan, maybe you can start. When you think about what you're proposing, let's start with a slightly more sort of problematic, negative way of looking at it. But I do want to address the naysayers because they're going to be watching this and thinking, oh, here we go, another sort of visionary way of transforming education. Nothing's really going to happen. So let's start with them first, the skeptics. So the skeptics who buy your book and haven't read it and are looking at the front cover and hear this will say, well, it's easy for you to say. It's easy. I send my child to school. I'm not going to come out of this system. Why would I ruin my child's future? I'm not the early adopter. Find someone else to do this. I'll just follow the herd. Tell us what you would say to the skeptic before they pick up this book. Either of you, maybe Nolan, you start.
Well, the first thing I would say is, wouldn't you want your child to be ready for the jobs of the future as opposed to the jobs of the past? I mean, we are going into a niche economy world where credentials will mean less and less because we can know more. And a child is going to rise or fall on how much they know about different things. And right now, the school system is underperforming what other kids would.
Right.
And if you want to say that there's a competition, ask yourself the question, would your child compete if they had been trained in the old school way of things against a student who was trained in our way?
Right.
In the new way. And that's the first thought program. The second one is whenever you have change, there will be creative destruction. You know, certain things will absolutely be broken. And, you know, 1/3 of young single women were telephone operators in 1930, you know, and all those jobs went away. I don't think anybody's a telephone operator anymore. Anyway, but what we want to do with Exodexa is to have a very clear vision, and we are based on some, I think, pretty solid rocks. And one of the rocks is no competition. And people scratch their head and they say, "No competition? What do you mean?" I said, "Well, who are you competing with, really? I mean, A, B, C, D, you know, on the curve. Certain kids get an A, certain kids get a B. Why? Why should it matter with the group you have?" And so sort of the second rock is no grades, no grades, no homework, no boredom. And so what does that mean? No grades. Grades imply batch processing and not individualized learning. We want to teach kids where they are and to not worry about how long it takes them to learn something, because that's irrelevant, you know. And some kids can, you know, and one of the unfortunate things that happens is, well, she's a little slow. That's a euphemism for being a little stupid. It's not true. Some kids are just slower than others, but very, very, very bright. And sometimes the slowness comes that they view things a little bit deeper than others, you know, which is a good thing. The other no grades is no baby CD, no homework. Homework is very, very, very counterproductive, because some kids have to have after school work. Some kids don't have an environment where they can do homework. I mean, if you're in a tiny cramped apartment with 2 other siblings, you know, having a quiet space to do homework is impossible. So I think that we've found a way to democratize and to actually make school potentially cheaper.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of attempts to make school better by throwing a lot of money at it. Turns out that there's no correlation between the amount of money spent and efficacy. And so I think and I'm not arrogant enough to think that all our ideas are going to work perfectly, but I think it's going to be a start. Leah, why don't you add on?
Leah, what do you think? What's your response to skeptics?
Well, I think if you look at the statistics of the number of families that are removing their kids from the school system and homeschooling, that number has just skyrocketed since the pandemic. And I think it laid bare what's missing in the traditional system for a lot of kids. Some kids are fine with memorization, but the majority are not. And there's statistics that show that we, 2 weeks after we experience something, if it's something we read, we'll remember 10% 2 weeks later. If it's something that we did, we can remember up to 90% 2 weeks later. So project-based learning and gamified learning is essential to that. And I think I think with a skeptic, I first would listen to all of their concerns, because there are legitimate concerns right now about disrupting a child's educational system. And we know, okay, this doesn't work for everybody, but it has worked for some. And that's what we know is safer than what we don't know. But I think to Nolan's point about operators. You know, there aren't any women going through school now with the hope of being an operator. I think we can help parents become more comfortable by letting them know that we will be tracking the progress on a daily basis, that in real time they'll know what their child is learning. But the only people who will know what the child is learning are the child, the teacher, and the parents. The other kids in the classroom won't know where you are in your studies. And I think if we can help to eliminate those early humiliations in the classroom, then I think we can impact the long-term issues that we have with a lot of young people who are shuttered in emotionally because of those early humiliations. I think I really do think that parents are going to like this system. I think teachers will as well. I think it's the system itself that's going to push back. And, you know, there's a lot of bureaucracy around all of the changes in education. And they need to be careful because we are talking about children's lives and their educational futures. So I feel like when they really look at what we're doing and when we're put through the test, we'll come through quite well. And I think that once we're able to do some testing, Nolan and I met recently with someone from a rather large school district outside of Los Angeles who was just begging for it. Please, we will be your testers. You know, we'll put it in our schools, and because we'll make it available first to families, but eventually to schools, and we'll need to be able to show efficacy before we can put it in the schools.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty excited about that too.
Yeah, I have the CEO of an organization called Prisma. You must have come across Prisma. Have you come across Prisma? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Kirsten Schroff was on the show a few weeks ago, and it's a digital school. It's a little bit different to Exodexa, but similar principle, similar thesis, solving the problem of the antiquated traditional education system that's not personalized, essentially. And the uptake is insane. The uptake's been insane. It is paid. It's not a democratized system, so it's not, you know, free for all. You have to pay $10,000 roughly per child, and it is modularized to some extent, and it's immersive and all of those good things. It's virtual though, and there lies the problem. That's when we were having a debate where it's great, but it's really not for everyone. You know, if we have, God forbid, another pandemic or there's something awful that happens with climate change and we're all stuck at home, then perhaps those sorts of systems would be default. But a hybrid approach is required, where I love the physical aspects of the physical building changes that you've talked about. So if I can just unpack that for a moment for both of you, whoever would like to take it. But when I read the book, one of the things that caught my attention was how you're taking a lot of time to think about the architecture of the environment, you know, fully recognizing that it needs a revamp from what you call STEAM lab marketplaces or market spaces to physical workout or workout session environments, to essentially say you need physical workout. And I'll ask you to tell me a little bit more about that. And then, of course, also, which I made a note of here, nap rooms. This is like sort of the Google model, right? So tired, go have a little nap. Workout rooms, nap rooms, and of course, the most interesting for me was the token system. So I'm hoping I'm saying this right. Is it dollar eds? Dollar eds? Is it pronounced dollar eds or dollar eds? What was it? The tokens.
Dollar eds is, but yeah, dollar eds is fine.
Dollar eds is okay. I wasn't sure how to pronounce it. The concept of rewarding. I love that concept. And every parent tries their best to do this with their kids at home. Bringing it into school is magnificent. And schools do a little bit of tokens here, you know, at the fun fair, at the local art fair, you can pay with tokens, not with money. They try and do it, but they haven't industrialized it, or they haven't actually rolled it out in the way you've described it. So if I may request you to maybe take a couple of sections each, but let's first start with the physical spaces, Nolan. Tell us a little bit about the psychology, the thesis, the idea behind that, and describe a few examples for us. That would be amazing.
Well, I think that what you want is to have a flexible area where it's a little bit like cubicles. but wouldn't it be nice if you could put your cubicle adjacent to your best friend? So, and there's kind of a hierarchy. And one of the rewards is for a kid who is doing well are freedoms. And you know, if you want to sit next to your bestie, you both have to have a certain amount of responsibility cred. You know, things like that. The economy, you know, I started this at Chuck E. Cheese, where I gave tokens for A's and B's. It was one of the best promotions I ever had. Kids loved to be able to do that. But there was a problem. Why not for C's and D's? You know, again, this hierarchy, the self-identified kids who think they're a loser is where the system is really failing them. And I want everybody to thrive to the maximum amount of their capability.
Mm. Mm. And so, Leah, and tell us about, so that's the cubicles. I love that idea, by the way, because I wish I could hang around with my best friends when I was at school, because I was in flow state with my friends, although we messed around a lot. But we'll come to that in a moment, because I love the fact that you talk about, and I have to say this because I might even make this the title of the show. I love the fact that you say, as bold as saying, learn from the 4 years of high school education. So learn the 4 years of high school education in 6 months. You know, that's bold, but I love it. And I think that that's going to make people obviously watch this. But talk us through. So Leah, maybe we can pull this thread. Talk us through the motions here. So perhaps you could go back to physical exercise, because again, that's very interesting. So why workouts? And to the extent, I think you even say you work out 40 minutes, then you come back and you do some more work, and then you're off again, you're working out. There's a lot of working out in the day. So what's the science behind this?
Well, our brains are function better when we are at full capacity, and we're at full capacity when we are doing aerobic work as well. So I think, and having it not like, you don't have to do a team sport if that's not your thing. You don't have to play tennis if that's not your thing. You have to pick something that you do during that time period that accelerates your heart. You know, in a perfect world, we'll have the kids with whatever the latest version of the watch is that gives them a feed, readout of what their heart rate is and what calories they're burning, and so that they start to understand the bridge between their body and their mind, and in a way even that our medical community doesn't think in terms of food as fuel. Like, what do we need? What do I as an individual need to do to be at my peak capacity? And that will include nutrition, and and having the student understand it about themselves, as opposed to reading something from the government department that says this is what we should eat and how. This would be something that they would be able to measure on their own. And about the dollar eds, I mean, imagine if children are rewarded for good behavior, for kindness, for an effort on behalf of another student, if they're rewarded for those kinds of things, and then they have an idea, they want to start a little business, that's where the pool comes from as well, for the companies, the school's company stores and the school's company products, that the kids, if they can come up with something that they think they could market, then having a little incubator on campus where they pitch to other students, where the students decide what we're going to focus on, and then everybody helps to work that one forward, and so on. And I don't know, how many you can do a year will depend on how many students you have, and all of the rest. But I think the idea for the school that Nolan outlined is a really rigorous academic school that's, there are no grades. So instead of having students batched by age, we have them batched by area of interest and then levels of expertise within that area. So you might have a young Sheldon who actually is an expert in an area that someone 5 years younger than him or 5 years older than him doesn't understand the way he does. So it leaves room for children to work at their own pace, which is why 6 months. And, I came to that understanding through my own, when my son was in high school, which is almost 100 years ago now, but when he was in high school, his best friend was in a near fatal car accident. And my son asked me if he could spend his afternoons at the hospital with his friend, helping him stay on top of his studies. So we made a deal. I told him, if you do your homework from 9 till noon, I will drive you to the hospital for the afternoon and pick you up at the end of the day. He finished 11th grade. So it was January of 11th grade that happened. He finished 11th grade and 12th grade by that June and graduated a year early because he wasn't trying to stay in line with the class. He was able to work at whatever pace he could get stuff done. And I think there are a lot of students. There are some students who might take a little bit longer because, as Nolan pointed out earlier, being a slow learner doesn't mean you're a slow person. It means you're processing new information differently and it's taking you longer to process it. So I think we'll see both comfort in however long it takes you to get through, but the ability to get through really quickly if you're motivated.
One of the most attractive parts of what you just said is the body-mind linkage, which I believe schools either haven't got a clue or don't know about, or I know you talk about ignorance and apathy, and I like the way I'll ask Nolan to do it in a minute, but I like the way you describe that. There is a lot of work to be done on body-mind linkage because at an adult level, I wear this. My Apple Watch is here somewhere. I wear the device most of the time because I have some health conditions, so it keeps me in check. I know my ECG. I do my ECG regularly. I do my heart levels, oxygen levels. I need to. Okay, I'm in that state, but I do enjoy knowing that my body and mind are operating in sync. Whether I'm doing some deep breathing and meditation, yoga, or intense physical exercise. We haven't brought that to our children because we're worried about the technology devices, more frequency, another device that they're staring at aside from the phone and the tablet and so on. Is it fair to say, though, in defense of some of the schools, and please agree or disagree or have a view, that schools are trying to look at things like nutrition? At least in the UK, I know that they're trying to look at food and educate children on food. And they are trying to look at AI and the new technologies, but in silos. And there is no joined up approach here. It's almost like, right, we should do some nutrition. Let's have the best food possible. But of course, they're not joining any of this up. And it's not synchronized the way your architecture is synchronized in Exodexa. Is it fair to say?
Well,
very fair.
The wonderful thing about AI, and let's just say the whole class of big data, is that we will find out things that we didn't know before. And I want to go back and amplify the exercise. 90 minutes or 20 minutes is all you really need per session. If you're vigorous, you need to get your heart rate to 80% of your max for 20 minutes. That causes your brain to secrete a chemical called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And that is a building block protein to dendrites.
Mm-hmm.
And so it hasn't been proven, but the theory is that the reason if you exercise before you learn something, you remember it better, is that you're actually putting some of what you're learning into hardware through dendrite growth. So your brain is actually getting heavier. There's a very, very good book called Spark from a guy named John Ratty, who was a medical doctor from Harvard who did a whole extensive amount of the learning exercise link. And he was able to increase school outcomes of whole districts by a standard deviation just through introducing exercise. So it's proven, it's been its efficacy is unparalleled. Nutrition is one of those things that I think the reason we don't know whether you want a high fat, high carb, high protein, or nothing,
Right.
For breakfast, is that I think it's individualized. And I think that we are going to figure out that combination for an individual and maybe be able to say it tracks blood type or genome type of some sort.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times when the data is noisy, that means that it's disparate. That is, that one size doesn't fit all. And that's what creates the noise. So
Mm.
that's
Mm.
kind of my pontification on that one.
Yeah, you bang on the, actually, you raised a very important point. I, a while ago, had a gentleman called Dr. Alicio Fasano from Mass General in the US, who is probably one of the leading authorities on the gut biome, right? And we were talking about the gut, the state of the gut, and its link with the whole body. And of course, it's way more important than we think it is. And he actually dispelled a myth. He said to me, probiotic is not for everyone. In fact, it's probably a foolish thing to do unless you figure out what your individual needs and requirements are. So you really have to understand yourself. And we're all 8 billion people in the world. There'll be a lot of commonality and similarity, but we're all different based on our diet, our genome makeup, and the way we live our lives, and so on and so forth. So you're bang on. I guess the challenge would be schools need to provide lunch. They need to provide food, and their optionality has to be somewhat limited. Otherwise, costs go up because it's a challenge for someone administrating some of this out. But tell me a bit about, I want to change course because this is very topical right now. In fact, I was having a debate with a bunch of parents recently, and I know you will address this, both of you. So this is, let's call it the open AI stroke GPT revolution, generative AI revolution that's going on in the world that we all know loads about. Of course, I'm in the space too. So I'm building Gen AI models. And without question, as totally subjective, I know your son is doing software development, and he's talked about how it's game changing and increased productivity. I'm using Gen AI in research in the diversity space. It's insane. I mean, it's increased the pace at which we can produce research by 70 to 80%, reduce costs by 50 or 60%, and in minutes, really, what was taking even days, weeks sometimes to do. So let's bring it to schools, though. So here are the objections I see. The first objection is parent A saying to parent B, and two different. I'll copy your, is it Pat and Sam example, or right at the beginning of the book. By the way, in the book, for those who are hearing this, there are loads of examples, compare and contrast, loads of real life scenarios, all peppered all through the book to bring it to life. So it's not an academic journal. It's not just theory. It's very pragmatic. So at the beginning, you talk about these two individuals. One does it one way, the other one's the opposite, and you're trying to help us realize that it's all good. There's no right or wrong. It's all good, but different. So these two parents are having a conversation. Parent one says, "Oh my God, Chat GPT! I'm spending so much money. I'm giving so much money to the school, and my kids are using Chat GPT. What's the point of sending them to the school for $20,000 a kid or whatever it may be?" And then the other one says, "You're right, but if you use Chat GPT in the right way, like me, it can be game changing. Your kids can learn so much and so on." And this argument's going on. You have the answer. So, and I love the way you describe it in the book around immersion and so on and so forth. So tell us how you would help me. Let's imagine I'm the parent who's like, no, I mean, come on, seriously, like my kids won't think they can't memorize, they can't think, they can't analyze. You outsource the damn thing to Chat GPT. Why is it okay to have Chat GPT in schools? And how?
One of the things that I'm really excited about with Chat GPT in schools is it levels the playing field for all the dyslexic kids, first of all. You might have great ideas and not be able to put them on paper. Well, now you can. And I think it comes down to what is the purpose of their education? Is it to learn and to learn how to learn? Or is it that we want them to be writers? It's if we have students write their paper and use Chat GPT or not, but write in your paper assisted by Chat GPT or OpenAI or whatever platform they're using. But and then instead of handing in the paper, they present the paper to the class. They present their findings to the class and they do a Q&A. we'll know if they've learned the material or not by the Q&A, and we add public speaking. We have all these students who are scared to get up in front of class. Well, let's start it early and make them do it all the way through school so they get past that fear, because we're all afraid to get up in front of a group of people. We know we're being judged. If you're doing it in front of your class and you've done your paper, then we'll know that you've learned it. And this generation is going to have access to this and better versions of this for the rest of their life. So teaching them the ethical use of it, I think, is important.
Well, more than that, you really want kids to know tools. You know, I mean, I was in engineering school, we had a slide rule. You know, that's because we didn't have calculators yet.
Yeah.
You know, was my brain hurt because I got a calculator? I don't think so. You know, and it was so much better than a slide rule. Though the slide rule did some interesting things because it made you focus on orders of magnitude. But anyway, I diverge. I love the fact that these tools are becoming so powerful. And so, yes, I can't imagine a high school kid graduating and being worth anything in the workplace, in the knowledge universe. You know, you could probably still lay brick, but without a understanding of AI. And so we got to get used to this puppy because it's real and it's here.
Can we talk about the financials and the unit economics here? Because another thing is going on here where a head teacher is going to listen to this. By the way, I'm going to be buying a lot of your books and dishing them out to the head teachers that I know, and I know many, because I think it should be mandatory. It should be a mandatory read as part of all of the books they read. I really do. And it doesn't always mean they're going to, buy the franchise program or be Exodexa fans and champions. What it means is they will take, even if they take away one thing. I mean, I certainly have taken many things away, and I'm not implementing really, apart from my own children. But if they take away one thing, that could be a game changer in the way a child experiences school, then we've done our work. Because this is a seismic problem. It's going to take a long time to fix, I think. Now, the head teacher's probably thinking, well, this is great. I really want to do this, like the one you talked about, Leah, the one in your district. So tell us a little bit about, it sounds grand. I mean, it's stuff like the marketplace or the market spaces, and then these innovation hubs that you have, and various other ideas that you have embedded in the book. Is this going to cost me more? I mean, I don't have much money now. I mean, it sounds like I've got to spend 2x or 3x more. Talk us through the logic here, the commercial financial logic.
Much cheaper. But okay. I like to do this with people who say that that the solution is spending more money on schools.
Yeah.
So, shop floor analysis. California spends between $11,000 and $12,000 per student for high school. It's kind of the budget. We know that the average teacher with pension and everything is about $60,000 a year. School physical plants are all paid for by a different thing, and so it's not really expense, but the school budget still has to deal with light, heat, janitorial, and insurance. That's maybe $20,000. So we have 32 kids. That's $320,000.
Yeah.
We have a teacher at 60. We have heat like that, about 20. So no matter which way you slice it, we're maybe up to $100,000. Where'd the other 200,000 go? And so the reality is that I think that we can do a lot more with less. And any true solution is something that saves money. That's the promise of automation. That's the promise of technology, is that we do more with less. And I think that our school does that. And I think that it would be possible to have a very successful school that would cost you $5,000 to $8,000 a year, maybe less.
And this requires financial engineering as much as it requires thinking through the physical plant, the facility in a different way, right?
Precisely.
Yeah. Have you seen, I know you're deploying it or you're testing it out. Have you seen any bright spots right now? And what sort of, one, and B, what pushback are you getting?
The brightest spots that we're seeing is we are trying to collect all the bits and pieces of educational software that's been written over the last 20 years. And we have been delightfully surprised at how much good stuff there is out there. Leah and I were on a Zoom, was it yesterday or the day before, with the virtual reality biome?
Yeah, I think that was the day before, but yeah, it was fascinating.
There's some really good stuff. And so one of the things that we want to become is this hub or nexus of all the good stuff out there, kind of the steam for education.
Yeah.
And to take and I think that over time we will be able to create playlists, because there's so much good stuff out there. The navigating through it is going to be good. And I'm hopeful that we may actually be able to lash on some AI so that we can cross-correlate the kids' interests with what's there and create a playlist. And I think that will be very special, because it will have been tailor-made for that child's interest. And so he or she is going to believe that they're on holiday. I get to do what I want. What you want is to graduate from high school. You didn't know that, did you? But now you're really good at it.
Can you, on the bright spots, before we go into the pushback or the challenges, how does one do this in pragmatic terms? So let's assume I'm running a school right now. We're having this conversation. I want to do this, but I'm afraid that I don't want to scale this immediately. I can't because I'm running the school and there's an operating model, but I'd like to prototype it or pilot it. How do you think we could do this in real terms?
We're hoping to raise enough money to do a pilot ourselves. So
okay,
take it, Nolan.
Well, I also think that you take little nibbles. Like we did a test in the Philadelphia school system in my previous company on this one simple subject, Spanish vocabulary. And they couldn't mix the next year. They couldn't mix. There were 4 Spanish 1 classes. 2 of them used our software a couple of times a week for de minimis amount of time. When it came to Spanish 2, they couldn't mix the classes, because our kids had 2,000 use of 2,000 Spanish words. Kids who didn't had 200. It was a whole order of magnitude better. And so that's a bite-sized thing you can do. Just add a little bit of gamified learning into a particular area. And I think you can gradualize it in, and there will be things that are appropriate, like this VR walk through the body from the inside. Wonderful, wonderful software. And that should be a part of any school's biology program. Not that hard. So
do you, sorry, excuse
you
me, carry on.
go ahead.
I was saying, with that in mind, what I'm thinking here is, I guess, the different phases of Exodexa, but in a way that is a problem that needs solving immediately, which is all of these fantastic innovations, solutions, whether it's AR, VR, AI, that are ed tech friendly or classroom friendly, need to be aggregated, vetted, given context. Because often we find with some of these innovators, their context building is a bit of a problem. So they lose the buyer. They lose the buyer from day one. They're not able to paint the picture, the story, the narrative well. So let's imagine you're able to do that. So you're also, I guess, to some extent, you're also creating an inventory of these best of breed, innovative, disruptive solutions that you can put into the modules that you're describing. Heck, even in physical space. I mean, why wouldn't you have AR, VR in a physical space as an enhancer of the physical space, right? For example. Or some digital walls, or even bots. I mean, robots. Why not have certain robots in the future as part of the school environment, as part of the enhancement of this physical space? For example, I'm sure you've got many other avenues and options. So, am I right in saying that is probably another big part of the Exodexa manifesto, which is, here is all the powerful innovation in the world. We've been filtering it, understanding it, putting it into context. Use this for this, use that for that, use this for this. So school and head teachers who don't know this stuff, they can't be expected to know everything, can pull off literally and plug and play.
Well, I like to slice the world slightly differently.
Okay.
And I ask myself, who has the ability to make decisions? Probably first and foremost, parents, to the extent that they are enabled. And some parents are richer and some parents are poorer. And so most parents have the financial capability to enhance their kids' education, but maybe not completely over. Second, private school here in Los Angeles is $40,000 to $50,000 a year, well outside the budget of most people. But if we can have a school that charges $8,000, you enable a whole bunch of more people to do that.
Absolutely.
The second big bundle of decision makers are teachers. And the teachers can make decisions, but in a constrained way and in a way that maybe is not well funded. So if we have a teacher that says yes, but we don't have enough money, having the traditional school system structure, and now the parents can each put in $100 and get the software, and we're all good to go. The teacher is enabled, the parents are enabled. And then we have the big pile of the teachers' unions and the administrators. And they're probably the ones, well, I lie a little bit. The administrators are probably, let's assume that they are good fellows, well met. And that they want the best. But they also have a mandate and a higher responsibility to be responsible. And so the more that we can prove efficacy, the more we empower them to do it without looking back. And then in the US, we have school boards, which are elected. And I see that there will be a time where a slate of board members can be pro Exodexa and force the thing through the ballot box. So that's kind of, I don't know if that's the panoply of what you wanted to hear, but that's kind of my back of the napkin theory.
Yeah, makes sense. Leah, And just a few more questions before we close off, because of course we could go on for hours with this because it's such an incredible topic. So Leah, when it comes to the work you've been doing in the past, and you talk about, so you're the CEO of the operation and so on, and you've got your work cut out, I guess, because it's such a powerful mission and there's so much to do. And I'm no doubt you'll have the best resources and the funds will come in, so no doubt. What's the one sort of wish you have? If I give you one wish now, sort of the Harry Potter magic wand, moment, over the next 3 to 5 years, what's that one thing you sort of say to yourself, if you could just do this, then we could make this change happen? Have you thought about what that could be?
Yeah, I think having our pilot school would make a huge difference, because we could then implement all of what we're talking about. Whereas I think in most traditional schools, they're going to try a little bit here and there, and the stuff that has efficacy proven, they'll try that. But I think having our own school where we really can do the no grades, no not batching the kids by age, but by interest, and really having kids take agency over their education, so that they're there because they can't wait to get back to what they were working on yesterday.
What is each of you? I'll go one by one. The one message to parents after they finish listening to this over the next hour. Leah, start with you. What's that one message to parents you want to share today? For you,
listen to your children. Listen to what their interests are and what's not working for them in school, and don't think of it as their failure that this is not working for them in school. Think of it as the system is not adjusting to their need, and then looking at what we're attempting to do. And we can offer our game to anyone in the world, and that is a big part of our initial focus, is a video game that we're creating with the curriculum in that we can send everywhere. The testing of our theory in an actual brick and mortar situation, that's going to start locally, but our goal in that 3 to 5 years would be to prove it and build it out so that it's available. I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere. So having digital options and virtual options is important, because there are kids growing up now in rural areas who have internet service. We didn't when I was a kid, and now we can reach them. But the bricks and mortar will take a little longer, but I think it has great legs.
Great message. Love it. And Nolan, for you, what's the message to parents from you? Given that you're a very experienced parent too.
Well, this is not a high-tech solution. If you ask your kids, what did you do in school today? The default answer is, oh, nothing.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what you do instead is you get a rough idea. They had, when my kids were growing up, they'd have their textbooks, and I'd kind of look at it and everything. Instead of asking what they did, I would ask them as though I were curious about something that they were learning. I wanted to, as much possible, is to put them in the role of the teacher of me in the subjects that they were working on. And that, I found, was a way to get them engaged in a good conversation. And so, I don't know, that's a parent tip. But
you hit the nail on the head, and this is every parent's nightmare. So how was school? What did you do at school? Nothing. By the way, this is what I asked my daughter, and then we have a series of other questions and conversations happening. I usually start with, what was the most fun thing you did today? At least I get some sort of an answer. She usually says drawing, and then my friend X, and then of course then we start and we go into another domain. But of course I need a lot more training in that department. It's funny, as a parent you switch off that sort of amazing creative work brain that you bring to, I bring to my startup or my social impact venture. Sometimes you come home or with your kids, you morph into someone else. I don't know why, but I haven't quite yet mastered, the universal self. Yeah, it's nearly there.
Well, one of the things that we're going to do at Exodexa is we're going to have the AI create an email to the parents daily based on what the kids were working on that day, and maybe even prompt them with some questions. And I think, I'm doing that from a marketing point of view. I think parents would just love the hell out of that.
That's beautiful. I love it. Simple idea, but with a lot of power and impact at the end of it. And this is what Exodexa is really for me. I want to say one final thing, and then we'll close off. I just want to sum this up for a lot of people who need to understand the importance and urgency of Exodexa. And you've got this at the beginning of your book, if I may. According to UNICEF, over 600 million children and adolescents are unable to reach minimum proficiency levels in reading and math, or maths as we say in the UK, even though 2/3 of them are in school. This book is dedicated to the children left behind. A powerful mission, and a mission that you certainly have all of my support for, and the straight talkers that we have in our community. So once this show is done, we will talk about how we can help, at least in Europe and the UK. And before I go, Leah, maybe starting with you, how has this show been for you today? And just some input for us would be amazing. And then, of course, Nolan, I'll give you the last words.
This has been great, fun conversation and valuable. And I want to say, like, one of the things that Nolan and I have often said at the end of a lot of interviews is that please go buy the book and give it to all the teachers you know. And you've already told us that you're planning to do that. So I thank you for this conversation. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Nolan.
Well, like a good interviewer, I think you were able to frame the mission that we're on very well. And, I love having stretch goals. I think that we are often limited by our own brains. And if you can imagine it, you can do it. And the road is not without obstacles and strewn with boulders, but I think that if you have strong underlying principles, it'll work. And I feel like we're building on rock. And so that's exciting. And I think the book and the school and all that, I think it starts working together, because the book, at the very least, can give a shared vision. And so if we're all pulling in the same direction, then it accelerates at a higher rate. And in order to pull in the same direction, you have to know what that direction is. And so I'm happy to start a direction, knowing that it will require some deviation over time as we get data back. But I think it's a pretty good start.
For sure. Absolutely. Thank you so much. May the Exodexa force be with you all. And I'm always around. Absolutely. I'm always around here promoting your work. And I will get a whole bunch of these and start distributing them out. Thank you so much, Nolan Bushnell and Leah Haynes. You're both fantastic. What a brilliant purpose and mission-driven journey you're on. So be well. Thank you for coming on the show. And I look forward to having you back in many months, where you've got a pilot, you've got the progress and the evidence you need, and then all guns blazing, as they say. So thank you very much from me. All the best.
Be good.
You too.